Hello, Maddie here. Thank you for joining me again for another video about, this time, multiple books. Don't worry, we're not going off on like a rant about a dozen books. This time it's 6. Because today we're talking about series that have burned me. For those that know me and know my reading preferences, know I tend to stay away from series. That's not these books' fault. I tend to stay away from series because 1, it's a big commitment. 2, there are 2 common issues I run into that are just annoying. First is starting a series and not the entire series having been released. And so like, if you read the first of 3 books and only the first book is out, because even if the next book is coming out, even that year, it's going to be 2 or 3 more years until the last book comes out. So if a series has like all but the last book, I'll potentially start it anyways. But if it's like the first of 3 or 5 books and like none of the other ones are released, I'm probably not going to pick it up. And the likelihood is that I will probably pick it up 5 years from now. And maybe then the series will be completed, which is great for that book. The other issue is finding books at like the library or a bookstore and them having like the second or third book and not the first one. And so I'm like, well, this sounds interesting, but I can't get the first one right now, so I'm just not going to bother. To be fair, this is less of an issue I run into since I use Libby so much. It's easy to just get the first book, although there have been times I've found a series that looks interesting and the first book hasn't been available, and I'm just like, I don't want to rent the other books yet, because even though I want to like have them in my possession, I don't want to rent them and then, or check them out, them have to be returned before I can actually get and read the first one. So those are 2 reasons why I just kind of in general stay away from series. But these 2 series are all on their own and they're just awfulness. Let's just get started. Okay. So the first series, I'm not sure if this is going to be divisive or not. It's really going to depend on who you are. Like totally and completely. This is not going to be like a broad popular or even unpopular opinion. It's just going to very much depend on your reading preferences. And I don't know which way the reading people that read a lot, I really don't know where they fall on this. But the first series is Divergent by Veronica Roth. Both of these series that I do not like have the same issue. They have an incredible first book. The first book, the world building, the introduction of characters, the like introduction to like the storyline and the conflict, amazing, impeccable. Devoured the first book. I devoured Divergent. I did see the movie first and I loved it so much. I read the book because I heard good things. Loved the book. The first movie honestly does a pretty good job of the book. Its issues are the same issues all movie adaptations have, and that it just leaves stuff out. You can't get quite as deep. Friendships, relationships, character development, things like that. But in general, it follows the plot line, all of that stuff. So I do like that book. Well, I love that book. Great movie. And that movie has a great soundtrack, by the way. You're like, okay, well, if you love the first one, how could it be so bad that you would add it to a list of series that have burned you? Let me tell you. So I read Divergent. What is the order of those books? That is a great question because I don't know. So Divergent, Insurgent, Allegiant. Divergent, awesome sauce. Insurgent, literally nothing happens. This whole video, okay, in order to let you know why I hate these series so much, there's a minor spoiler alert. Not that I'm not going to tell you the endings of either of these series, but just give you kind of little tidbits along the way of just why I hate them so much. But okay, Insurgent sucks so much because, literally nothing happens. It is a net zero book. It introduces characters and then like kills them all off. It introduces plot and then like gets rid of that plot. And you're just like, I read an entire book and nothing happened. It's not like, these characters were introduced and they gave us these great revelations and then they had to die or whatever. It's like, no, they were introduced and then things happened and they died and it didn't matter. Like literally that's it. Great first book, net zero middle book. And the last book was just so bad. It was so painful getting through that book. I feel so bad. So I mentioned this in my blog and I have to mention it. So the last book, Allegiant, my mom, my little sister, and I read out loud on the drive to Florida, which is a 22-hour drive, and we read the entire book. And we hated every minute of it, but we just had to get through it. I think really they read it because I was forcing them to read it because I just wanted to get through it and I didn't want to be alone in my misery. But we read the book in that drive and hated every minute of it, and it was just awful because this book sets up this genetic difference, which is like divergence, and the ending is so dumb. Oh, the plot development was stupid and I hated, but it's really the ending that you're just like, this whole book was painful, but if it had had a satisfying ending, then maybe I could give it to you. No, the ending was so stupid because you set up an entire plot for 3 books and then did something different at the end. And it's like, really? Seriously? You're gonna I'm trying so hard not to spoil it, but it's so stupid. It is so awful. The ending is so terrible. I just wanted to throw it out the window of the moving van. Other asterisk I need to put with that is, so the first book was awesome. So for Christmas that year, I had actually bought my little sister like trilogy, and I still to this day I feel bad about that Christmas gift because it was such a waste. Because the first book is great, but it's like, I don't even know if she even kept the other 2 books. They might have gotten sold off or just like given away or something. But it's like, that was a waste of a Christmas gift because it was just so bad and they're just so terrible. And it's so sad because the first book is so good. So that's the first series. And my comment I had, this is what I out in the wild. If you start talking to me about books, I have a barometer for if I'll actually listen, not actually listen, how much weight I'll give to your suggestions. And this was an accidental barometer. In college, when I had read the books, I had roommates, and I think I might have asked them about it, or like they asked about it or something, and they were like, oh my gosh, that whole series was like so amazing. It was so good. I absolutely loved it. And it was in that moment I was like, oh, because I didn't necessarily agree with their book recommendations in general. They weren't really readers, to be honest. And that's how you can tell like a legit reader from like a casual reader if they like the Divergent series, because they don't know what a good book series looks like. So if you sing the praises of the Divergent series, I don't take your reading suggestions very seriously. Sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's just true. Now, if you're like me and you say the first book is great, but the other ones weren't, then I will listen to your opinions because they line up with mine. Everybody has their own opinions, but that is just mine, and that is my barometer, and it's worked really well for me, to be honest. I'm just saying it's worked. Now, I'm sure basically all of y'all have heard of that first series. The second series, I don't know if I've ever met a single person that has ever heard of this series. If I'm remembering correctly, this is what happened. I found the first book, I'm pretty sure I found it at half price, not realizing it was a series. And I read it on a plane and I devoured it. I hadn't finished it by the time I got to where I was going, but I finished it that weekend or whatever. I bought the next 2 books to have them be delivered before I got home so I could read them. That was such a mistake. And that series is, I actually own the first one, the Imposter Queen series by Sarah Fine. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that I bought this book at half price, and that's why I own it and I have kept it. And I said that I bought the other 2, and I did, and then I resold them to half price. I was rereading my blog, so this is where this knowledge is coming from because I don't actually remember at all. I'm fairly certain I got no money for both of those books when I sold them to half price, but I couldn't have cared less because I was like, I don't want them. It follows the same awfulness of Divergent. Incredible first book. World building, the introduction of the characters, so good. In like both of these books, what I love about them is they have this like, I would say, kind of fantasy element. Divergent is definitely like dystopian future. Imposter Queen is definitely like complete otherworld fantasy creation. But they have these kind of like main characters with this like asterisk of, yes, we live in this fantasy world, but I'm even different from that. Like I'm even more powerful, more whatever the book is than average. It's so good. And like I said, I devoured this first book. It introduces our main character and some other supporting characters. The second book introduces our kind of second main character because there are 2 main characters and her supporting characters. Second book was still awful. It was like Insurgent. It was a pretty net zero. Like we got introduced to characters and the most important ones lived. But I'm pretty sure that, like everyone else died or went away or something, that by the end, you got to the end of that book and it's like, you could have like used the first chapter to introduce these characters and then gone on with the story. Literally nothing else that happened in that book mattered to the story, like at all. It was awful, but we got through it because I was invested in the characters from the first book, the Imposter Queen series. And the name of the first book is The Imposter Queen. Y'all, Goodreads and Libby are like, between those 2 apps, like I don't need anything. Okay, so it's the Imposter Queen, the Cursed Queen, and the True Queen. The Cursed Queen, it's pointless. It's useless. It introduces a couple of characters, and that's it. Like I still remember the story from that book. I don't know why, of all the books for me to remember so well, I don't know why this is the book I remember so well, but I do. And I remember the things that happened and looking back and being like, why though? Like, This didn't add to this character's like character development. It didn't introduce anything into the story or the conflict. It's just things that happen. And yeah, they weren't like just like day-to-day life. They were conflict, but they did not actually affect anything. And so they were pointless. I do not think every word, every sentence, every paragraph of a book needs to be like, this is important to the development of the story, the development of the characters, whatever. But if I can read an entire chapter and literally nothing of importance happens, not a single conversation, not a single, even like a look, a touch. If you can get through a whole chapter that did not actually change or affect the story in any way, it should not be in the book. It annoys me to no end to read sections of book and been like, that entire thing could have been cut and the book would have stayed the same. But that was the entire second book. You could have cut 95% of that book and it would have been fine. The story would have stayed the same. Then we got to The True Queen, the third book. Sorry, my cat is circling and I'm afraid he's going to just rub up against stuff. Anyways, so you get to The True Queen, and in all honesty, I did not finish that book. At about a fourth of the way through, I started getting my suspicions, being like, I'm not confident that this is going to go well. And then about the third of the way through, I was like, I am now betting on the fact that this is just going to be stupid. I don't know if I've said this in previous videos. There are books that have not had the happily ever after that goes along with the Maddie guarantee, but that does not make them bad books. I can definitely appreciate books that don't have the happy endings I want and still see them as good, valuable, important, helpful, whatever, enjoyable books. I can still give them their warrant, their merit, whatever. This isn't one of them. So I got about a third way through the book. I was like, this author is going to choose like, not even just like path of least resistance or most obvious or whatever. No, it was like, you chose the stupidest way to resolve this book. So we skipped ahead and we're like, oh yeah, it's even worse than I thought it was going to be. Like my suspicions were true, but they were like even worse than my suspicions. Like the way it got resolved was so bad. I just pretend I didn't even read any of that book. I just pretend it doesn't exist because I hated it so much. Because I did read the last probably like 10, 15, maybe even 20% of the book to be like, okay, what's going on? Because I need to, because I was like, maybe just like this chapter seems bad. No, it was so bad. Author ruined everything, kept the wrong people alive. And it was like, I can appreciate a good sacrifice. I really, really can. Like I said, for the importance of the story, for the development of characters, plot, to get the resolution you need, I can understand the moment when someone has to be sacrificed. I can understand that. But when it's stupid and unnecessary and it happened because you wrote it that way, you can tell in stories when you're like, no, this person like has to die. As much as it is awful and I don't want that to happen, I understand that for this story to be complete, like this has to happen. But that didn't have to happen. The author was just awful and it was so disappointing because with Divergent, Imposter Queen is so good. Again, I remember it so vividly and so well, and it is so good. The characters, I love the characters introduced, and like with Divergent, the kind of setting for what the whole like conflict is going to be, so good, so interesting, completely riveting, sucks you in. It is so good. And then the author just goes and ruins it. Why though? It was so good. You did such a good job. All of that ranting to say, these series are so not worth reading, but I want to put a little asterisk on that and say both Divergent, the first book, and The Imposter Queen, the first book, can be read standalone-ish. For the most part, at least for that book, they will wrap up the main conflict issue, whatever, of that book itself. And it obviously has open-ended questions for kind of like, well, what's going to happen next? Because the like overall conflict is obviously not resolved. But if you can like equip your suspension of disbelief, if you can equip the being satisfied with the answers for that book, both Divergent and The Imposter Queen first books are totally worth reading. Honestly, they are very, very good. There's a reason I kept this book but sold the others. I've never owned a Divergent, but I have thought about stealing the books. I'm pretty sure it's at my parents' house because that book was so good. It was so good. I absolutely loved it. So while these series have burned me, 2 out of 6 books is not a great ratio, but they are still good books. They are totally, totally worth reading if you are okay with not completing the series. Like I said, each book will end pretty satisfyingly for the conflicts brought up in that book itself, but you will have knowing in the back of your mind the overall issue has not been resolved. But in your mind, make up a story. It's going to be better than the actual books themselves. Those are the series that burned me. Next, we're going to talk about series that we love, which is going to be a much more fun video and probably forever long because I have series I haven't liked. I do have more series I have liked than series I've read and haven't liked. Stay tuned for that and hopefully you'll come back again. Please like, comment, and subscribe. All those things are super, super great and really wonderful and very appreciated. With all of that, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you have a great night, a great week, great weekend, great month, great year. I hope you have all the greats because you are truly worthy and deserving of them. So until next time, c'est bien. Bye.